Welcome to the Diffuse Podcast with host Philip Grindell, CEO and founder of Diffuse, a global threat and intelligence consultancy that blends psychology and intelligence to mitigate threats and risks to prominent people and brands.
Welcome back to the Diffuse Podcast. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe. We also have a newsletter, Diffuse News, which is available weekly. So again, very interesting, very useful newsletter, gets great feedback. So please do subscribe to that. Today, my guest is Mark Summers, the founder and director of Summers Partnership, a specialist executive search and family office consultancy that he established a quarter of a century ago, 25 years ago. 21 years ago. So for more than 20 years, Mark has advised family offices, wealth managers, private banks on talent, structure, and human capital, helping ultra-high net worth families build teams that can operate in a complex but high-trust environment. He's the author of 2 books on family offices and careers within the sector. He sits on the Spears 500 judging panel and is widely recognized as one of the leading voices globally on human capital in private wealth. So, Mark, welcome.
Well, Philip, thank you very much indeed. I'm delighted to be on your podcast. It's very good of you to invite me, and I hope I can live up to that introduction. I'll do my best.
I know you will. I know you will, having spoken to you, and also having read your book. It's we were just discussing it off air, but I've read the Family Office Careers one, which working for a Billionaire, which I thought was a really good read, a really good introduction, and explained the characteristics required, the different personalities, the difference between working for a private equity company, if you like, and a private family office. I thought it was really informative. So I would certainly recommend people get a copy of that and read it if they are interested in this world, which I hopefully by the end of this, they will be. But I guess my first question to you then is, I'm conscious that your background prior to this world was coming from the military as an officer. But how did you get into the world of private family offices?
Well, we set up the business 20 years ago, my wife and I. And before that, we had looked at the likely growth areas in recruiting, which is where we were specializing when we left the army. And the wealth management and more recently the family office area has been a very strong growth story. So that was an area that we wanted to get into and to grow along with it. And of course, within the wealth management and the family office areas, one of the most important forms of capital is the human capital side. A lot of people think it's about the money on the financial capital side, but really the most important form of capital is the human capital with which you can surround yourself.
And before we get on to that in more detail, how have family offices or the family office industry changed in the 20 years that you've been going?
Well, one of the most striking changes has been the professionalism and the increased institutionalization of family offices, which has been particularly interesting. And we've been right in the vanguard of hence writing that book to help educate the talent coming into the sector, because obviously we need more talent to come in as the number of family offices grow. And also, secondly, as the great wealth transfer happens, and the next generation taking over family offices tend to change the staff, which again increases demand on the total amount of human capital that's available. So we wanted to help educate people coming into the sector. And that also plays into one of the other trends that we have seen, which was from a recruiting point of view. In the olden days, when we first started doing this 20 odd years ago, it was quite normal for the principal of a family office, when normally it was a he, was setting it up, to look around his own network and find the private banker or the accountant or some other trusted advisor that he had known for a long period of time and bring him in, again, normally as him within as an employee, into the family office, because the level of trust was such that it gave the principal peace of mind, regardless of the ability of that individual to operate within a family office type environment. So one of the other great trends we've seen alongside the institutionalization is actually the growing realization that professionalism within the employees is actually more important initially than the level of trust. Once the individual has got into the family office and starts work within it, it's their opportunity to demonstrate and their ability to be trusted and earn that trust from the principal and the wider family, as well as their colleagues. So professionalism is the number one trait, and trust is earned over time after that.
And from a human capital perspective, what separates a robust family office from one that's vulnerable?
Well, a robust family office is one that that is in line with the values of the family. So the family has to clearly articulate and define what their values are, and also set the purpose of the family office, which again needs to be clearly articulated. Because once you have the values and the purpose of the family office having some kind of meaningful relationship between the two of them, it means that then the proposition of the family office can be more easily defined. By proposition, I mean, what does the family do, for whom, by when, who pays, and which order is it delivered in. So it's really, what does the family office do on a day-to-day, what does it deliver on a day-to-day basis? And once you've got the proposition tied down, it means that then you can get on the bit that we find particularly interesting, which is getting the right people involved. And again, there has to be an alignment between the values, the purpose, the proposition, and then the qualities of the people, and overlapping interests with the values of the family, because that again gives meaning and purpose to the employee's job. And once you've got the right people around, you need to pay them in the right way as well. So we got to look at compensation as being a hygiene factor. It has to be right. It also has to be structured in the right way to incentivize individuals to uphold the values and the purpose of the family office and deliver the proposition. And pay is very, very important foundation for that. But the reason it's last on that list is because it's the thing that we address last, but it has to be done accurately. And incentives and compensation and reward has to it has to back up the values and the purpose of the family office in order to make it future-proof and give it the resilience that you were asking about in this question.
And so, you've been advising family offices for over 20 years now. Where do you most often see things when they start to go wrong?
Well, where it starts to go wrong is where the family office detaches itself somehow from the governance framework. And what we tend to see is that there's a theory of the fourth law of thermodynamics, which is the law of entropy. So where you have a system that's set up correctly in the first place, but then when that system isn't constantly reviewed and examined and modified according to changes in the outside environment, then that system tends to decay. And exactly the same way as a family office starts to lose its purpose, loses its mojo, decides that it's going to go off in a different direction from the one that the family is going in, that's where it quietly and slowly goes wrong. So in order to future-proof the family office, it needs to be constantly reviewed. Otherwise, it becomes stale and dusty. There isn't any career progression for the professionals within it. The compensation isn't reviewed. The governance isn't reviewed. And it's where the staff become more interested in their own situation as opposed to serving the family properly.
And in your book, you refer to some family offices that have been going for quite literally hundreds of years. Are they successful because of the amount of wealth that's within the family office, or is it back to the governance and the other issues that you were just referring to?
I think it's very much down to the quality of the human capital that surrounds the financial capital. There's also spiritual capital and social capital as well. But of the four forms of capital, the human capital is the most important, because without that, the financial capital dissolves, evaporates very quickly indeed. So it doesn't really matter how large the family office is in terms of AUM. For it to be resilient and future-proofed, it has to be staffed correctly, and it has to be managed and led correctly, not only by the family, but also by the senior management team within the family office.
And so how dangerous then is it when too much responsibility or influence is owned by one individual? Whether that is the CIO or COO or whoever that might be, it must be, ultimately it's a family business. It's unique in that respect in terms of, as you've alluded to, and the wishes and the values and the purpose of the family. But presumably you get some very, very talented people, very ambitious people that come into that world, and with a lot of responsibility, a lot of power to some degree. Where's those risks sit around that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. There is a very high level of risk associated with the over-reliance on the C-suite within the family office. And going back to my earlier point about entropy, the family office world is particularly susceptible and particularly vulnerable to the concept of absentee landlords. So the generation that set up the family office need their wishes and their spirit needs to be applied by subsequent generations of the family office, because absentee landlords do not get the benefits or the returns that they expect, and that's where family offices become very dusty and entropy sets in if those if the purpose and of the family office isn't continually examined, and the executives within it are equally not examined and tested. The kind of attributes that we're looking for when we're looking for a C-suite executive within a family office, we're looking for people who are perpetually curious and who have a determination to their continual professional development, and will also challenge themselves and their teams to make sure that they stay as competitive as they possibly can, because there's very little examination of the performance of family offices one against the other, in the same way that most industries you get good performance data in terms of who's doing well and who isn't, because the family offices are small independent groups. They tend not to share data and particularly well, and therefore it's very easy for people to become or to fall asleep at the helm.
So, when you're then recruiting, I mean, presumably you recruit across the entire employee base of family offices, not just senior executives.
We concentrate on doing the senior
right.
Executives, but interestingly, for clients that are setting up their family office, the most important first recruit to get right is actually the EA, who is absolutely essential for getting things going and being the principal's right hand. So unusually, not only do we concentrate on the C-suite, but we also have an EA recruiting service as well, particularly for new family offices and ones that are undergoing considerable transition.
And do you recruit, when you're recruiting at the senior level, have they normally got previous family office experience, or do they come from different environments?
One or the other, actually. So often they've got family office experience. So that gives a little bit of reassurance that they understand some of the generic challenges and attributes of family offices. But because of the growth of the family office sector as a whole, there is an increasing requirement to recruit from other areas as well. So there is a considerable difference, though, between working for a private equity firm or a consultancy firm and working within a family office. So we have drilled down and identified some of the characteristics that allow a corporate executive to be successful within a family office environment.
So you're talking about personality, are you, as opposed to necessarily competence?
We're talking about, yes, we're not talking about professional competence, because it goes without saying they have to be top of the game in terms of their professional knowledge and expertise. But we're talking about the attributes, the personal attributes that are different working in a family office environment from working in a normal corporate environment.
And can you talk about what those might be?
Yeah, they're many and varied, actually. But the first one is humility. And very few people are recruited into corporate jobs for their ability to be humble. Another common one actually is curiosity. We're also looking for people that have a very good sense of being a steward in terms of their ability to be a good custodian and not only just take the decisions and recommend decisions that are accurate and correct for the immediate issue that's being resolved, but are also the correct decisions for the medium and long term, by which I mean 10 and generationally correct decisions. I've mentioned the curiosity side, and one of the greatest skills that we're seeing, when I say greatest, I mean most important and growingly recognized as such, is the ability to be an excellent communicator, not only verbally, but in writing, using different platforms and new systems and so on and so forth. Because as families grow and become more complex, then you have different generations, which obviously immediately implies different ages. You have spouses coming in to the family. You've got spouses going out of the family. You've got potentially stepchildren coming in and stepchildren going out. You have people who are financially literate and people who are financially disengaged and really not interested in the financial capital side. And also, I think, and we've written about this in the other book, there is a growing understanding that people absorb information in different ways. So the neurodiversity, particularly amongst founders of new family offices, the neurodiversity side means that people like to receive information in different ways, and the family office executive, as the hub of communication within the family, within wider stakeholders, and within themselves, is the point, the nexus at which all that communication needs to flow. And so, how people are addressed, how information is shared, how it's received, and so on and so forth, is becoming more and more sophisticated. So communication is one of those very important attributes. And the final one to raise today is the willing suspension of disbelief. So you can be that excellent professional that you talked about a moment ago, and you can make very carefully, very considered, recommendations about the best course of action. But if the principal says, actually, thank you, but we're going to do it this completely in a different way, then you have to absorb that and have the humility to continue with what it is that you're doing and not be upset by this rejection of your advice.
And I guess you mentioned humility there, and I was going to come back to this because it was interesting. You started with saying, very often that's not necessarily a requirement that's spoken about in the corporate world, but very important within the private family world. And is that one of the key reasons? Because there'll be times when perhaps your advice is very good and very worthy, but the family just choose to ignore it and they go on their own direction. And, you just got to recognize that you are a servant of the family.
Exactly. This is a business in which you have but one client, and the principal and the family will look at various courses of action through different lenses. So coming from a corporate background, let's say you're in private equity or something, it'd be terribly simple. All you have to do is express what you're thinking on a spreadsheet in financial capital terms, and the answer that comes out at the bottom of the spreadsheet is the answer that everyone within the organization would probably subscribe to. With family office, they're balancing financial capital in the same way as that, but you also have the human capital we've mentioned. You have the spiritual capital in terms of what's the journey of the family, where's it going, what's the purpose of it, and you also have the social capital as well. So that is who the family are, what it means to be a member of the family, their position in society, and so on and so forth. So, a classic example of that, where you might find financial capital coming into conflict with social capital, and maybe spiritual capital for that matter, might be on the way that tax is approached. Some people take great pride in paying the right amount of tax, and maybe even veering on the side of paying a little bit too much tax. And that may be because they're thinking more about social capital and avoiding any reputational damage of doing the converse, which is to try and pay as little tax as possible, maybe taking some shortcuts that are a little bit risky, or and so on and so forth. So in that particular scenario, you would have a difference between financial capital, which would make terribly simple in terms of how you would approach that question, mixed in with the social capital side and the potential reputational damage that it would do to the family to be accused of that publicly at a later stage. So I use that as just one example of the need to balance it. And so when you're giving advice, if you're the tax attorney giving advice in that area, it would be very simple about what you would expect the client to do. But the client may decide to do things in a slightly different, less risky way.
And how is that all complicated when you then look at multiple family offices?
For multi-family offices are slightly different insofar as the proposition tries to be as tailored as possible for each of the clients, but clearly it can't be that tailored because one size doesn't fit all. So it varies a bit. The difference between multifamily offices and single family offices from a human capital point of view tend to be that you have better career opportunities within a multifamily office. Clients have less key person risk, because clearly if the CEO of your single family office falls under a bus, then there's a lot of readjustments to be made. But if your relationship manager in a multifamily office falls under a bus, there is the greater intellectual horsepower and capability to be able to continue the service to that single family office. So there are pros and cons for each of the methods.
Is it a different type of person that works in a single as opposed to a multi-family office, or are they very similar?
I think there are more similarities than there are differences. The main difference is that the compensation packages within multifamily offices will tend to be linked to the growth of the assets under management, but measured in terms of attracting new clients. So essentially, they still remain largely on the sell side of the industry. The working within a single family office, you are very much on the buy side, and the compensation. You can't be too general about this because there's such a wide variety, but compensation packages within single family offices will tend to be more linked to the growth of the AUM, but by doing it organically and making the right decisions from an investment management point of view, often, not always. And consequently, it's got a different growth metric, and there's a different reason for being. The purpose of a single family office is different from the purpose of a multi-family office.
So can we talk about recruitment and vetting, which I guess is your kind of one of your key things? And I know you've got your own metric within the organization that you use. Can you talk about that? About what are you looking for? How do you pick out the best people?
Well, we do it in two ways. We look to attract the best people into our process, and then as the process develops, we're also looking at ways to weed out those that are unsuitable during that process. So essentially, our process changes from being a selling process in terms of attracting people into our process to being a much more refined assessment and discerning approach to making sure that the people within the funnel are the correct people, and making sure that we protect our clients from the risk of hiring a dodgy person. In fact, we're very alive to this because we divide the entire sector into three types of employees. 10%. So if we work in big numbers here, say we've got a very large database. So if you had 1,000 people that you were looking at, or working as FDs within a family office, for example, or CIO, or head of family office, whatever it is, we would say that of that 1,000, 10%, 100 of them would be likely, by our reckoning and our experience, to be the rainmaker type candidates that are curious, they are continual professional development, they are very good stewards, they tend to make the right decisions and keep themselves motivated. So they would be the rainmaker side, 10%. 80% of them, 8 out of 10, we would call lawnmowers. So competent, but lacking the curiosity and the professional development side, can veer to becoming gatekeepers rather than people that are responsive to dynamic situations outside the family office. So they're the lawnmowers. And then the final 10% are what we know to be the well poisoners. And those well poisoners are the ones that are plain dangerous. And the reason we have to have very strict methods to weed them out and protect our clients from them is because they do exist. Often, not always, but often, if a family office finds that someone has been defrauding them, has behaved badly, hasn't upheld the family values, and so on and so forth, and they decide to get rid of them, in the most extreme cases, they tend not to call the police necessarily, which would happen elsewhere. For reputational reasons, often, they tend to hush it up and get the person out of the building as quickly as they possibly can. And this means that person is then looking for another job in a family office. Obviously, will not be raising this as a particular reason for their departure, and will do all the best they can to cover that up. But they've got the taste for the family office world. That's what they've got some experience in, and they would seek to find another job within it. So the well poisoners are definitely out there, and clients definitely need to be aware that it is, unless they're very careful, it is possible to employ what they think might be a great candidate, but actually turn out to be a well poisoner.
And is the industry small enough that those well poisoners become known and become vetoed within the industry?
No, it's not, because the industry is growing. Family offices often aren't particularly well networked amongst themselves. There's no industry body. there are all sorts of reasons why that kind of behaviour would not become apparent. So no, say there isn't. You have to have a very healthy skepticism. We take the approach that we trust first and verify second during the process. So we use third-party vetting companies to do that because we don't want to be doing that ourselves. We want experts to be coming in and taking a fresh view of them. We'd like to have their social media backgrounds, presences checked as well. And the reason for that is because in this rather geopolitically dynamic world where things change very quickly, it's really quite important to know what one's employees are thinking, posting, doing in their digital lives as well, because it does have an impact on their professional office lives as well. So we like to have the digital side covered. We also do the references, talking to the last employers, going back quite a way, other co-workers, other bosses, ideally the principals, some subordinates as well, to get a full view from a qualitative point of view about what it was like to work with that person. The third-party vetting, it gives a quantitative view in terms of, did this person work from X to Y as per their CV? Did they get the qualifications they're claiming? Are there any county court injunctions, criminal records, other things that employers should be aware of as well? So there's a quantitative and a qualitative base there. Plus, you've got the traditional interview process as well, which is good in lots of ways, but we are aware that it does have its limitations. You have to be aware of that. So in terms of blind spots, you need to know that interviewing someone is not a perfect way to get to the bottom of what it is that they're really like. So we use all of those sides. We also use competency-based questionnaires, which are very, very important because you ask for evidence of the various elements of the role. So you're asking, so when they had previous experience of doing this, between date to date, what were the empirical outcomes of that? What did they learn from it? How did the situation resolve itself, and so on and so forth? So you're asking for evidence about this, and so when that's written and then questioned at an interview, it gives an increasingly reliable way, not only in terms of their competence for doing the role, but also how true that they're being, how reliable are they.
So my perspective has always been that vetting, it has its place and it is obviously a value. The challenge has always been for me that people change, when they're employed, and it's often in that environment that we come across what people refer to as the insider threat piece, and sometimes that's negligent, sometimes it's malicious. Very, very few people, according to research, go in with the intent of being malicious, but subsequently can become malicious. Are there mechanisms that you use or that you encourage others to use that is like an ongoing vetting process that kind of manages the employee once they're in place?
Yeah, that should be kept up. So it's not just a one-off vetting process. It should be checked on a regular basis. I don't quite know exactly how regular the frequency of that, the cadence of doing those checks, but they certainly should be done on a regular basis because of two reasons. One, it can identify people that have stepped on the wrong side of the line. But secondly, the fact that it's done demonstrates that the family and the leadership of the family office think that it's important. And that can act as a deterrent as well. So people can think twice about doing something because they think that the chances are they are going to get found out about it. So there is the deterrent side. It's also the reason why we trust, but then we verify during our recruitment process. It's why we tell people that there is a third-party vetting process to be done if they are right at the at the end of the process, and so that people that should remove themselves from the process do so before they get found out.
And do you find then that the word trust, you referred to it earlier on in the conversation, and it's obviously a huge part of being a member of a private family office. And yet, increasingly, this insider threat piece is becoming maybe more talked about rather than necessarily more widely practiced. But how does that coexist? That kind of worrying or that concern around the insider threat and the importance, specifically within the family office world, of trust.
Yeah, it's a difficult balance to do that. Our assessment is that human capital is the most important form of capital. The interesting thing is that audits are done very frequently on the financial capital and performance in terms of various funds and various investment processes as well. So far more attention is paid on measuring that than actually the people. And it's always the weakest link in the chain. It's always people. It's not systems as a rule. It's not the passwords. It's not all those sort of things. Most systems are quite difficult to crack unless you've got unless you've done a phishing expedition or some other compromising process to get the passwords or get someone to do something that they shouldn't do. So this is something that employers and families should be ever vigilant about in order to make sure that they don't leave metaphorically the door open and that they are checking that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting for me because I see a lot of when we're looking at family office from the world or from my world in terms of risk and threat, the subject of cyber threat comes up a great deal. And I'm of the view that most cyber is caused by humans, negligent or otherwise, doing things they shouldn't be doing, and yet we don't necessarily talk about it in the human capital perspective. We talk about it very sort of specifically around it's a cyber threat. And actually, I agree with you in terms of no, it's a human threat, and it's because of more often than not negligence or ignorance or naivety rather than necessary maliciousness. But your world of human capital is the most critical phase of any risk and threat because it relies on somebody doing something right and somebody doing something wrong. And it's a huge responsibility you have then. And if you're and you've obviously done it well because you've been doing it for 20 years, but that responsibility of picking the right people for these key roles is a huge responsibility.
Absolutely. And very closely allied to your cyber threat is also the digital threat as well, in terms of what it is that people post, whether it's compromising in some way or whatever. So yeah, digital and cyber are very closely related, but where that matters is where it then reveals a weakness in the physical protections, and the physical sort of systems and processes that are in place. So yeah, so one leads to the other pretty quickly sometimes.
And do you see this in terms of my experience has often been that the younger generation have a different relationship with the internet as a kind of broad term, and therefore have a different relationship with privacy. And so you may have the patriarch or the matriarch as being a very private person who doesn't seek publicity or anything, but the younger generations have a much more open view of that subject and then are inviting risk or inviting unwanted attention and exposure because they just have a different relationship with social media and the internet and posting pictures and what have you. Is that a reflection of what you're seeing?
Oh, completely. So, I mean, you might have the G1, the founders of the family office, may still have a shredder underneath their desks in order to shred the addresses from envelopes that they've received and other information. So the paper security gets shredded to protect that kind of security. And yet the grandchildren can have a totally different awareness, much in line with all of their contemporaries as well. And the real difficulty there is things like Snapchat or wherever. So you've got the geolocation sites; they can see their friends can see them. They know who's clustering around which particular activity. It's great. I mean, it's for making friends and keeping up with your friends. It can be really, really helpful. But obviously that brings with it a whole raft of security questions and concerns as well, like the Strava running app as well. If you want to compromise your location, then that's another pretty good way to do it. However, trying to explain that to a young teenager is probably rather, well, I know is nigh on impossible. And actually, why should they not have the kind of interaction with their friends that all their other friends have, just because they are the next gen in a family office? It's a real restriction and one that's pretty unfair for them and very difficult to explain why they can't be like their friends. So that is a very, very sensitive area and does require some specialist assistance.
In your book, you talk about family offices often lasting 3 generations, and there's I thought really interesting reasons why or behind that theory. Is that still something you're seeing? Is that still a pattern of behaviour?
Well, actually, it's interesting that the clogs to clogs analogy has come under increasing scrutiny, actually, by some academics, particularly in the States. And it's becoming considered to be less of a feature than it was before. I mean, certainly it can happen, but it isn't the doom sort of a story that a lot of advisors would have it be. So I think that as time goes on, and people become more aware of this, that it isn't quite the truism that it was once thought to be.
Can we do a bit of myth busting? Because I see a lot of adverts, shall we say, for send us your email address and we can send you a list of all the top family offices and all their email addresses and all this sort of stuff. And my experience is that they're actually quite private people. They're not flamboyant in terms of giving away their data or their information. So, there's loads of people that want to work for family offices because they assume, they're wealthy, so they're going to be, good clients, etc. But what's the reality about working with family offices? What is, how easy or difficult is it? How difficult is it to get into the family office world? What's your experience over 20 years?
Well, to answer the first part of your question, if someone's offering you a free list on LinkedIn or some other app or something like that, then I think it's what's true there is true in other parts of the digital world. So that if it's free, it means that you're the product, not what they're giving away. So they're probably doing it to create greater traffic and up their profiles online. So I think that's probably the first myth to bust, or maybe not myth to bust, but thing to point out. And the second is that, yes, of course, family offices have got large pools of unregulated capital, but what people often advisors, service providers, people that want to get into the sector often fail to understand is that normally that that large pool of capital hasn't accumulated because the principal is profligate and with their money and not careful with their money, and quite our experience is quite the reverse. Our clients are definitely looking for a great deal of value for money in services that they acquire. They're very sophisticated purchase of services. They've got very high standards. They are in a position where they have their defences are ready to their alarms are ready to be tripped very quickly. So you have to be very clear about what it is that you're doing. You have to be very trustworthy. You've got to be there for the long term. And you've got to demonstrate value at every single stage of the process. They are not, because they have large amounts of money, there is a reason for that. They're very good at keeping it, investing it, and stewarding that money. So it is not for a provider in the family office world, it is not a get rich quick type approach. You've got to be in it for the long term.
Absolutely. Can we just move on to you personally? I mean, as I read out in the introduction, you sit on the Spears judging panel. What are you looking for?
Yeah, so I've done that. This will be my 20th year on that panel. For each category, there are slightly different characteristics that are being looked for, and the mechanics of what happens is you sit in the panel. You're provided with the information that each of the firms that are wanting to be considered for that category have provided. And then there are different characteristics that we're looking for each one. So it does vary slightly. And the reason I'm on the panel is that I'm reasonably well networked and know the landscape quite well. So we do know quite a lot about people and organizations within the sector. So there is the extra value that we can add from sharing that knowledge in a sort of critical sort of way. But without dodging your question, each category has slightly different. Well, no, it's not secret at all. If I could remember, I'd share them with you. But they're slightly different per category, and actually, it lines up, I think, very nicely with what is being asked of each of the organisations that are submitting their information for it. So there is a link between what they're asked for and what the criteria are, and then the debate with the judges, happens in a fairly sort of lively way, really.
So, final question then to close with, because I'm conscious of time. If you were advising a family office that was new and being built today, I've suddenly come into a load of money. I'm going to open a family office. What would you insist that I prioritize from day one?
Working out and being able to articulate what your values are, working out what this office is for, as what's it really, really for, what's its purpose, and then working out what the proposition is after that. So it's really getting the foundations in place before considering recruiting anybody at all. I would also recommend getting the EA first, because it's absolutely critical to get a really good EA. And I think in terms of what I'd have as an overarching thought when I was putting everything together would be to try to resist entropy as well. So everything I put into place, the governance, the structures, the advisors, and all of those things would be thinking in the background, how do I resist entropy? How do I resist this getting stale? And how do I keep it fresh and relevant and changing in a dynamic world? I mean, we only have to look at what happened this last weekend at the beginning of March in the Middle East to know that the world can change very quickly indeed. So, and family offices need to be alive to what's going on outside the office and responsive to it, but in a way that keeps the purpose true and in line with the values, but reacts to situation, as the world changes, reacts to those changing situations.
Mark, thank you so much for that. If people want to get hold of you, how do they do that? Where should they reach out to?
Oh, come via our website, somerspartnership.com. That's SOMERS. Partnership, like the county rather than the season. And come to us via our website or drop me a line. We're pretty visible. We like people getting in contact.
Wonderful. Well, Mark, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real joy speaking with you and having your expertise and your your perspective on these subjects, which you make sound very easy, but I know are far more complicated. But thank you for that. Just a final reminder to everyone to subscribe to the podcast and share it if you think it's of value and interest. And of course, subscribe to our newsletter, Diffuse News. And on that note, we will say thank you for listening and goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the Diffuse podcast with host Philip Grindell, CEO and founder of Diffuse. Please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platforms.